February 12, 2025 meeting of the House Public Safety Committee to order. We have a quorum present. Before we begin our meeting, I want to remind everyone that the committee expects proper decorum at all times. All dialogue goes through the chair. Signs are not allowed in the committee room. There'll be no outburst or clapping. There is no standing or sitting in the walkways and aisles. If accommodations are needed, communicate with the sergeant staff. There will be consequences if there is a disruption. Thank you to the sergeant at arms staff who were present for helping maintain decorum in the committee room. Representative Bliss, have you had a chance to review the minutes of the February 11th, 2025 meeting?
Amazingly, I have, and I would move them.
Representative Bliss moves to approve the meeting minutes from February 11th, 2020. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We have presentations and 6 bills on the agenda today. I'm allowing 15 minutes total per agenda item. Testimony and member discussions must adhere to the contents of the bill. If we don't get through our agenda by 4:45, we will recess and reconvene 123, which is across the hallway here at 6:45 p.m. The first item on the agenda today is a presentation of the Safe Harbor Program by Carolyn Palmer, Interim Supervisor with the Violence Prevention Program Unit at the Minnesota Department of Health. Go ahead and state your name. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Novotny and members of the committee. My name is Caroline Palmer, and I'm the Interim Supervisor of the Violence Prevention Programs Unit at the Minnesota Department of Health. This unit includes the human trafficking prevention and sexual violence prevention programs. Thank you for the invitation to present to the committee today about Minnesota's Safe Harbor response for sexually exploited youth. As many of you are aware, Minnesota passed a law in 2011 to create Safe Harbor. This law recognized that sexually exploited youth under the age of 18 should not be criminalized when prostituted, and instead should be offered services and supports. A subsequent 3-year process developed an approach called No Wrong Door to ensure that a youth seeking help would find resources and support in the community, as well as through systems such as child welfare and justice. Some of the early champions of Safe Harbor in our state included the Advocates for Human Rights, the Link, Breaking Free, and the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. Many youth and survivors came to the Capitol to advocate for the law. And in the early years of implementation, Representative Dave Pinto here led trainings for several thousand law enforcement officers across the state, and we worked together on writing Safe Harbor protocol guidelines. The Safe Harbor Office was set up in the Minnesota Department of Health, recognizing that sex trafficking and exploitation is an issue that affects the health and well-being of individuals and communities. The MDH program is responsible for managing regional navigator and supportive services grants, evaluation, protocol development, training and technical assistance, and we also manage a federal grant. And that grant comes from the United States Department of Justice Office for Victims of Crime, which is focused on improving outcomes for child and youth victims of human trafficking. We have received this grant 3 times in a row, and it currently supports a victim advocate at the BCA, working with the Human Trafficking Investigators Task Force and the Predatory Crimes Unit, among other activities. Thanks to long-term bipartisan support from this legislature, Safe Harbor has grown over the past decade into an extensive network that includes partnerships across our state government, we partner with nonprofit support services organizations, shelter organizations, tribal nations, and others. Services are available to you through age 24. Additional key partners include the Department of Human Services, which manages Safe Harbor shelter, housing, and outreach grants, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, which leads the state's child welfare response to human trafficking and exploitation, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Office and the Office of Justice Programs, and the Minnesota Attorney General's Office, among others. We're also building a labor trafficking and exploitation response in our state, thanks to our federal funding, as well as an investment in services by this legislature in 2023. A map of services and an overview of our state's human trafficking response is included with your committee materials. We currently have 9 programs and 2 tribal nations supporting regional navigators who act as the first points of contact throughout the state, helping victims and survivors access services. They also coordinate with multidisciplinary partners and provide training and technical assistance. In addition, we have 34 supportive services grantees providing case management, access to basic needs, and in some cases, legal help and healthcare. DHS currently funds 18 shelter, housing, and outreach grantees. Safe Harbor services are trauma responsive and designed to meet the unique needs of youth by walking alongside them on their path to healing, supporting their strengths, respecting their resourcefulness, and helping them imagine a bright future. Recent projects in Safe Harbor include the development of a training and video focused on the overlapping issues of human trafficking and substance use in the state, supported through a grant from Johns Hopkins and delivered to over 200 attendees this past fall. In addition, MDH, DHS, and the Department of Corrections are partners on a 3-year National Institute of Justice research grant that will dig deeper into these intersecting issues. MDH is also a partner on a 5-year Centers for Disease Control grant evaluating the implementation of the Love 146 Not a Number human trafficking curriculum for youth in Minnesota. We also create and maintain a training on sex trafficking for hotels and other lodging establishments that's required under state law. Today's committee agenda includes House File 129 that will make some updates to the Safe Harbor Evaluation Report statute. Our program is required to evaluate Safe Harbor every 2 years and write a report to the Commissioner of Health. We have also submitted the report to the legislature and appreciate that House File 129 clarifies this process. I want to thank Representative Repinski for authoring this bill. We gather data for the biennial evaluation through a database system designed in partnership with our grantees. Through this data, we were able to report in the 2023 evaluation that between April 2021 through March 2023, approximately 1,500 youth were enrolled in Safe Harbor programs. The average age of enrollment was 18. However, children and youth of all ages through age 24 were represented in the data. Youth experience human trafficking and exploitation throughout all parts of our state. I'm really pleased to say that a majority of the youth survey respondents, 95% actually, said they were satisfied with the organization from which they received services, and 80% said they were satisfied with the services they received. While these are good numbers, there's still much work to do, and we address the recommendations that come from the evaluation reports through the perspective of continuous improvement because the need is so great. In fact, this spring, we will be releasing a strategic plan for Safe Harbor to guide its future work. This is the first plan of its kind since No Wrong Door, and much has evolved that we need to respond to and adapt to. We're focusing on improving the overall health of the network, supporting the people who work within it, and creating more opportunities for survivor leadership. We have 3 survivor subject matter experts who are partnering with our strategic planning consultants on all aspects of the strategic plan process. We look forward to sharing and acting upon this plan, and while it comes a year after Safe Harbor's 10th anniversary of implementation, it will be a good opportunity to celebrate that landmark. So today, I just want to say thanks to the significant investments of this legislative body. Our state is a national leader, often consulted by other state and federal partners. Maryland, for example, created a regional navigator response after studying Minnesota's. And we have a meeting coming up with partners in Ohio to help with their Safe Harbor implementation. So to conclude, few other states have really made the same level of commitment as Minnesota has through funding and innovative policy to responding in a comprehensive, multidisciplinary way to the sex trafficking and exploitation of youth. I want to thank you for your commitment and for your ongoing support, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And we do have a couple minutes, and I suspect I was anticipating Representative Pinto would be speaking on this, and I'd just like to say that you wouldn't remember this, but that's the first time I met you was at one of the Safe Harbor trainings. And I want to point out that that was one of the most impactful trainings that I had ever gone to.
Nice. That
was one of the trainings when you had brought in a survivor of sex trafficking and exposing patrol individuals to their the survivor's point of view and letting the people from a patrol standpoint know that how important that first contact is and how the victim will cooperate with you if they have that frame of mind of that you're there to help and not arrest and hurt. So landmark training, and Representative Pinto, take it away.
Thank you, Chair, and I had not realized that you'd gone through that training. I'm so glad. I will say that was one of the proudest periods of my life was those couple years, and it really was Director Palmer who helped to kind of teach me so much about the dynamics of this issue. We talked so much, and I hope, and members, I think I brought this up on the floor as well, about how counterintuitive this issue is. There's a lot that springs to our mind about people held in chains and various issues, and just recognizing that it works in a very different way. And if we really, truly want to help people who are being exploited, we need to come at it with the right frame of mind. And you really taught me so much of that, both in your work at Department of Health, but previous to that in Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I should note, Mr. Chair and members, as Director Palmer said, we had collaborated, we were the co-editors on the Safe Harbor Protocol Guidelines, which I'm holding up, a couple hundred pages. If you, Mr. Chair, or the GOP members have been annoyed dealing with me at any point, imagine putting together a 200-page book. I can assure you, Director Palmer is a saint on top of her expertise. That was quite a challenge, but we came up with something really great. So I really thank you for your work, and thank you, Chair, for the extended time. And we can be proud of the work of our state, and I know we'll continue to build on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Palmer, for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
First bill on the agenda is House File 128. Chair Rarick, I believe that is your bill. Please come forward and to the testifier table with your testifier. Chair Rarick, since you are not a member of the committee, I will move your bill before the committee. We will lay your bill over for possible inclusion in the committee omnibus. Please begin your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's so good to be back here. I do miss being on this committee. It was about a decade I got to serve with you. So this bill comes out of the brilliant mind of one of the people sitting at the table. And I'm going to acknowledge him. He won't like it, but I'm going to do it anyway. So Mr. Johnson was reviewing statutes and came across this inequity between criminal sexual conduct statutes and prostitution. And believe it or not, our statutes are misaligned in such a terrible way that criminal sexual conduct of first degree, third degree, and fourth degree is a higher penalty than prostitution of a minor. So if you're going to sell a minor or buy a minor sex, the penalty is actually lower. And Representative Mueller and I worked for nearly 2 years alongside my testifier, Caroline Palmer, and a group of about 75 people to rewrite quite a bit of the criminal sexual conduct statutes. And this is one piece that, as we continue to do this work, we find new pieces that we've missed, and this is one piece. And I just want to thank Mr. Johnson for doing his due diligence in the interim and actually looking at statutes in such a way. So what it does exactly is House File 128 will increase the penalties to be the same as criminal sexual conduct for prostituting a minor. Very specifically, if the victim is under the age of 14, the penalties increase from 20 years to 30 years, which is the same as first-degree CSC. If the victim is between 14 and 16, the penalty is increased from 10 to 15 years, which is the same as third-degree CSC. If the victim is 16 to 18 years old, that penalty is increased from 5 years to 10 years. And that's the same as fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct. So that is essentially what the bill does. It is yet another piece that has come to light as we did quite a bit of work for many years, actually, trying to reform the criminal sexual conduct statute. So this is one piece I think that really needs to be done, because we definitely don't want to say to a minor that, if someone offered you money for sex, that's a lesser penalty than if they, took advantage of you. And you can read all the statutes as to ways that children can be taken advantage of. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Caroline Palmer, because she can tell you a little bit of how horrendous it is for a child to be prostituted or trafficked.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon again, members of the committee. My name is Caroline Palmer. Again, I'm the interim supervisor of the Violence Prevention Programs Unit at the Minnesota Department of Health, where we focus on human trafficking and sexual violence prevention. I'm very pleased to provide some technical assistance today for House File 128. And I really want to thank Representative Rarick for authoring this bill and just such steadfast commitment to working on sex trafficking and sexual violence. And we've worked together for many years. So I appreciate being here. The exploitation of children and youth in prostitution is a horrific crime, resulting in short and long-term physical and mental health harms that not only impact the individual, but also families and communities. Children and youth are exploited in many different settings, including within the adult sex industry, in bars, clubs, massage businesses, on the streets, and a lot through the internet, including social media and online advertisements. Sometimes youth engage in survival sex, meaning they trade sex for money, food, a place to stay, drugs, clothing, status in a gang. Traffickers and facilitators and buyers often seek out children and youth who are in vulnerable positions due to their age, race, economic status, disability, identity, lack of familial supports, lack of housing stability, substance use, and a history of abuse and victimization. It is easier to manipulate someone who feels like they do not have love or support, or who feels misunderstood and isolated. In some cases, unfortunately, family members are responsible for the exploitation of children and youth, sometimes trading their young relatives for money, rent, or drugs. A groundbreaking 2014 study led by Dr. Lauren Martin at the University of Minnesota, which is called Mapping the Market for Sex with Trafficked Minor Girls in Minneapolis, Structures, Functions, and Patterns, found that the age of sex buyers culled from police and court records ranged from 30 to 48 years old, while the age of victims ranged from 13 to 16 years old. The buyers described in the study came from all types of backgrounds, including business professionals, many living outside the city and coming in for work or travel. This is just one research example that illustrates the dynamic. Additional research is growing to show how boys are exploited as well through prostitution and trafficking, but services and resources are still catching up to meeting their needs here in Minnesota and elsewhere. Finally, children and youth who are exploited through prostitution suffer harms that can be lifelong. While being exploited, they're subject to abuse, threats, and exposure to drugs and dangerous situations. They may use substances to cope with the pain and trauma or to perform as required by the traffickers and buyers. Long-term impacts include post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety. Victims and survivors may suffer from injuries and long-term consequences to their sexual and reproductive health. In addition, they may end up engaged with the criminal justice system as defendants, which can lead to a lifetime of collateral consequences affecting access to education, employment, housing, and their ability to keep their children if they have any. So there really is so much more that can be said about the many harms that sexual exploitation through prostitution can have on children and youth. But hopefully this just provides a little bit of helpful background. I want to thank you again for your interest, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Chair Rarick or her testifiers? Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify with my friend Director Palmer, just that the comments were sort of talking about underage exploitation in general, but not, the administration is not endorsing this bill, is it? Or maybe you could just clarify about kind of, the administration has a formal position on the bill.
Great. We're providing technical assistance today, as we often do. We're requested to just provide information based from our program, but this is not a bill in the governor's budget.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, if I may.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I guess I'll just say, Chair Rarick, thank you so much for your work just in general on these issues. I will say that just speaking individually, I definitely see the point, I guess, raised by Mr. Johnson, then you picked up, about the difference between a completed act and hiring and offering, agreeing to hire. And the comparison with criminal sexual conduct. I will say I concede, I believe, maybe I'll ask you this, Mr. Chair, this is going to be laid over, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then in that case, I would be interested in kind of exploring the structure and language. I don't know if I exactly agree with where the penalties be set, and of course, we'd have to see, I assume that there's a fiscal note. Mr. Chair, I guess I'll ask that as well. Fiscal notes
Those
are
are
requested?
all ordered.
All right, thank you, sir. Well, then we'll also just have to see, obviously, how things fit. But thank you again for certainly exploring this, because it's an important thing to look into. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Representative Moeller.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Rarick, for your work. We have partnered together on many bills. I can't see you. This is so awkward. It feels like I'm just talking into the ether here. Thank you. That's better. Hi. Have enjoyed working with you on so many of bills in a bipartisan way that we've done over several years now. And to Ms. Palmer, too, have known you since you were back at the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault. So many years, and the dedication you have to this important work. Appreciate that as well. I just had one question about the bill itself, and I guess my question is maybe not the bill or just how the law actually works, but right now, if somebody engages with prostitution with an individual under the age of 14 years old, they could be charged with criminal sexual conduct. It might not be one of these charges here under this chapter, but it could be a CSC 1 even. It could be a criminal sexual conduct offense. So I'm not saying that this isn't needed. I just wanted to clarify that there are other tools in the toolbox so that these victims aren't completely without recourse under the current law. That's my only comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? No other questions? Chair Rarick, close it out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. House File 128 is laid over for possible inclusion. The next bill on the agenda is House File 131. Representative Knudsen, please make your way to the table with your testifiers. Representative Knudsen, since you are not a member of the committee, I will move your bill before the committee. We will lay your bill over for possible inclusion in a committee omnibus. When you are ready, please begin your testimony.
All right. Thank you, Chair Novotny. I do have the A1 amendment.
We have the A1 amendment. Representative Knudsen moves the A1 amendment. Explain your, yes, move your amendment.
Thank you, Chair. The A1 amendment requires that offenders who receive the stay of adjudication for one of the criminal sexual conduct offenses in the bill and are currently on supervision must also register as a predatory offender. The offender's supervision agent must notify them of the requirement to register. If the offender doesn't have a supervision agent, CA must notify the offender and local law enforcement where the offender lives. The offender must register as a predatory offender within 30 days of receiving notice of the requirement. That is the A1 amendment.
Senator Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And because it's an author's amendment, I'm going to recommend a yes vote. I do have some questions about it, but we can get into the questions about the broader bill when we get into that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Mueller, are you comfortable with the voice vote on this? Thank you. All those in favor of the A1 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Amendment passed. Representative Knudsen, with your bill now in the order that you would like, please explain your bill.
Thank you, Chair Novotny. House File 131 as amended. This bill provides greater protection for the general public. There are numerous violent person-based offenses for which registration as a predatory offender is required. Upon conviction, offenders must register their name, provide fingerprints, DNA, their address, and other information to their corrections agent or local law enforcement agency. There are times when, whether by a plea agreement or a judicial ruling, someone is given a stay of adjudication. This is where the guilty plea is not entered into the record. While stays of adjudication are a helpful tool for the courts when someone has committed a non-violent crime, where offenders are given the opportunity to demonstrate rehabilitation, sex-based offenses are serious crimes whose offenders prey upon vulnerable victims, oftentimes children. And it is important to keep track of those offenders, including those who were given a stay of adjudication. This bill requires offenders to register as a predatory offender who were given a stay of adjudication for the following crimes: felony criminal sexual conduct, criminal sexual predatory conduct, the use of minors in sexual performance, and child pornography. This bill also requires registration for an offender who was given a stay of adjudication for violating registration requirements. The court may waive the registration requirement if the offender is a juvenile and the judge finds on the record that there is a good cause to waive the registration. That is House File 131 as amended.
Thank you. I believe you have some testifiers. Will you start with Sheriff Welk? Sheriff Welk,
Thank you, Chair
introduce yourself
Damati,
and go
committee
ahead.
members. My name is Brian Welk, currently the elected sheriff of Cass County. I'm here today to support House File 131. I think it's a common sense thing to do. Do it for drivers violations with alcohol. You can no longer get that off your record if you violate that in a civil manner. It's a completely different proceedings of the criminal file. This makes sense because when I'm issuing gun permits, stays of adjudication sometimes won't count as against making that an eligible person. So this would help me do my job and making sure that if I do deny somebody, I have, when I take them to court or I get sued, that I'm able to be successful in the court process. Also, when you get a stay of adjudication, it doesn't mean the behavioral incident didn't take place. I think sometimes that gets missed on the victims that, you're getting a stay of adjudication, but that doesn't mean as a victim that this didn't happen, and some people see it as that, and there should be repercussions of the registering, the DNA, and that, people are held accountable in terms of where we know if something like this happens, we know where this person is, we know where to go to right away. So I appreciate your support, and thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Sheriff Welk. And the next testifier I believe we have is Kelsey Holberg. Kelsey, I have read your letter. It is inspiring and heartbreaking at the same time. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Kelsey Holberg, and I'm here testifying today as a victim and survivor of a felony-level criminal sexual conduct crime, specifically a first-degree penetration or contact with a persons under the age of 13 charge. I am here in support of House File 131. I've provided a picture of me at 7 in case any of you don't have kids or doesn't know what a 7-year-old looks like. I was sexually molested from the time I was 7 years old until I was 14 years old, with countless instances of abuse throughout those years. The defendant was 14 when it started and into his 20s when the last occurrence of abuse happened. I contacted the police in June of 2023, and I just finished going through 18 months of court proceedings. The sentencing hearing took place in early January of this year. The defendant in the case was offered a plea deal by Pine County that included a stay of adjudication with up to 30 years probation and up to 6 months in jail. I was shocked when the county came to me with the terms of the plea deal. According to the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission, the sentencing guidelines for the crime committed are 144 to 172 months in prison and registering as a sex offender. He ended up getting 6 months in jail and 10 years of probation. Probationary terms that have minimal impact on his current lifestyle. He does not have to register as a sex offender as part of the stay of adjudication. A person who openly admitted to the police to having sexual contact with a 7-year-old does not have to register as a sex offender in our state. He is a resident of the state of Pennsylvania, and as part of his plea deal, the courts are giving him the option to complete his jail time and probation in Pennsylvania or move to Minnesota. However, the state of Pennsylvania will not honor the Minnesota plea deal terms and would make him register as a sex offender anyways. I provided a legal opinion from a Pennsylvania attorney to the committee that was submitted by the defense in the case. My understanding is he is now contemplating whether he is going to stay in Pennsylvania or move to Minnesota, because Minnesota has no problem letting first-degree criminal sex offenders live here without informing the public. The fact that Pennsylvania won't honor what Minnesota decided speaks volumes. Pennsylvania would hold him to a higher standard for the crime committed in Minnesota than Minnesota is. A person who admits guilt of any sexual crime, let alone a first-degree charge against a person under 13, should not be allowed to hide in plain sight. I am assuming the defendant had no aspirations to live in Minnesota prior to being sentenced, and our laws are quite literally enticing sex offenders to our state. Do you want Minnesota to be known as a sex offender-friendly state? Our state claims to care about and prioritize children and families. It is one of the governor's One Minnesota initiatives, after all. Without this legislation, this body is knowingly leaving our children vulnerable to highly dangerous sexual predators. My case is an outlier in that the only reason I was able to pursue charges was because he is not a resident of Minnesota. Most victims of my generation do not have the option to pursue justice due to the statutes of that time. With that in mind, I had hoped our legal system would have taken the opportunity seriously and sought justice for me and the thousands of victims who have never come forward. After 20 years of working through the implications his actions continue to have on my life, and roughly 2 years of listening to county officials tell me that this is standard practice, the person responsible for completely altering my life is going to sit in jail for 6 months, have to call his probation officer when he wants to go out of state, and then it will all be as if nothing happened. He may even become my neighbor. I've included a copy of my victim impact statement I read to the judge during sentencing, as well as my mother's. I invite everyone to read them to have a better understanding of why harsher consequences for defendants and more safeguards for the public are so important. Having your body sexually violated is the least traumatic part of being a victim of child sex crimes. And unfortunately, our legal system is not doing enough. People who commit sex crimes against anyone, let alone 7-year-olds, should not be able to live in our communities without the public knowing. They should face harsher consequences for their actions. It is your duty as lawmakers to set the standard in our state, and you need to do better. Thank you for letting me testify, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And to remind members, the testimony and the impact statement are part of your packet. We have one final testifier on this bill, Scott County Attorney Ron Hosevar. No? Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I don't think you were you? No.
No, not on this bill? Okay. Are there any questions for Representative Knudsen or testifiers? Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Knudsen, for working so hard on this, and thank you for sharing your story. It's both heartbreaking and the way that you've been able to, change policy and advocate for changes in policy to make sure that others aren't impacted the same way that you were. It's inspiring. One question that I have for you, Representative Knudsen, it's obvious that stricter penalties are the most severe repercussions are going to not enable this behavior from happening. But one thing I do want to ask, does this also include similar laws of another state that were stayed, and then a resident moves to Minnesota who's been convicted of these acts? Would they also be required to register?
Last party best directed to nonpartisan staff, Representative Ingen.
Mr. Chair, Representative Ingen, I think it's a case-by-case determination. They look to see if the offense in the other state is similar to an offense in Minnesota that requires registration, but there is a general requirement that registration is portable. And if you look at the opinion from the Pennsylvania attorney that was submitted in your packet, you'll see an analysis of that issue of comparing offenses and when they're require registration from one state to another.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Diebel. Representative Engen?
Thank you. No
All
further.
right. Are there any other questions for the Representative Berg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I just want to commend our testifier on your courage. I often say that we don't owe anyone our stories, but it is having the courage to share your story, how we make changes and protect future generations. My question is for the author. So right now in Minnesota, our process is fairly objective, and I'm worried that the language in this bill would infuse subjectivity into statute. So when you were coming up with this bill and thinking about this language, what were some of the special circumstances that might cause a judge to decide not to have somebody register? What were in your mind the examples of reasons that someone would not have to register after committing a heinous offense? Thank you.
Representative Knudsen.
Thank you, Chair Novotny, and thank you, Representative Berg. Personally, I can't think of any situations where a judge should downward depart or give a stay of adjudication for one of these listed crimes. These are predatory crimes, and oftentimes they do happen to children, to vulnerable people. So I guess I can't list any specific reasons why that would happen.
Representative Berg? None? Anyone else? Representative Woody.
Thank you, Chair Novotny. Kelsey, thank you for your testimony. Obviously in this, did you feel let down by the court systems after everything was said and done?
Chair, Representative Whitty, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you look at situations like this, I know dozens of people that have experienced some sort of sexual trauma, whether it was in adulthood or as a child. And, I don't know the actual statistics, but the vast majority of them don't come forward. And then when somebody does come forward, from the start of this whole court process, the county, the plea deal that he got was the plea deal that they started with. Like, they didn't want to fight for this. And it's just extremely disappointing when I think about the issue overall. Vast majority of people don't come forward, and when they come forward, like I think of that Brock Turner case, there was 2 eyewitnesses, and the judge was worried about his reputation and his future. And to say that I was extremely disappointed with how the legal system handled the case is an understatement.
Thank you. Any further? We're pushing for time. Good.
I just was going to say thank you for your courage for coming forward.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair. And I think, first of all, thank you for your testimony. This is hard to do and talk to you, and I'm going to try. I echo the sentiments, like this is a really important conversation, and thank you for the bill, Representative Knudsen. I know that in my first term here, I did carry the bill and successfully pass the bill to get rid of the statute of limitations for sex crimes, specifically because of the story that you shared, because I think it is important that people get to see justice regardless of when they're willing to come forward and have that conversation. And sometimes it takes a long time, and I totally understand that. So my question about this particular bill, because I carried that bill, I know that there were a lot of issues with retroactivity. I wanted to make it retroactive because the constituent that came to me that expressed issues with it was like, I want to be able to have my day in court. I want to be able to have justice. And I was told that was totally unworkable. And so I'm interested if you've had conversations with agencies and with the judicial branch about the retroactivity that it seems like your bill would entail.
Representative Knudsen.
Thank you, Chair Novotny, and thank you, Representative Hollins, for that question. That was an amendment that has come to us very recently. So no, I have not talked to anybody in the judicial branch about that at all. Yes.
Okay.
Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, too, and I will also thank Kelsey for your courage to be here today and to share your story with us. Appreciate you being here. I have just some more technical questions about the bill, too, and that was going to be one of my questions as well about retroactivity. I know that you have sent in a fiscal note for the bill, and I just want to make sure that will include the amendment. The fiscal note request will include the bill as amended. I'm seeing Mr. Walls nod.
Mr. Walls.
Mr. Chair, Representative Moeller, fiscal note has been requested both on the bill in its original form and as it would be when amended. So there have been two requests.
Okay.
Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's helpful to know, just because I think with the retroactivity, just trying to especially figure out people who maybe committed crimes long ago, like are well out of the court system, to try to go back and figure that out now, I think could particularly be difficult, especially for the BCA. I know they're under the amendment, they're supposed to notify people. If not, I don't know what kind of records exist for that. So I think that is one thing I'm anxious to see what they say about that. And Representative Berg touched a little bit on the objectivity piece, having the court decide if there are any cases that wouldn't qualify. And the way predatory offender registration works right now, courts don't make any decisions about predatory offender registration. It's entirely statutory. So someone can't say, like, I'll plead guilty if I don't have to register as a sex offender. It's all statutory. If you have certain crimes, even if you weren't convicted of them, if they're out of the same or similar circumstances, you're going to have to register, and it's statutory language that triggers that. So I have a concern about injecting judicial discretion into this when it's right now completely statutory and objective. We had a predatory offender registration working group that reported to the legislature in 2022, and I'll even back up a little bit from that. When Representative Rarick and I worked on the bill to overhaul our criminal sexual conduct statutes in order to make sure that offenders were held accountable for sexual assaults, the recommendations from that group very clearly said, we want the legislature to look at our predatory offender registration statutes because it has been added on to over the years, and the folks that wanted the change for the criminal sexual conduct stuff did also want change to predatory offender registration with a concern that it had been added on and perhaps unworkable in some ways. So that group met. This particular recommendation was not part of the working group's recommendations. Some of those recommendations Representative Rarick and I worked on last year together. Actually, she carried the bill and we implemented some of those. So I think there's something workable here, but I think we should also be mindful of the larger conversations that have happened about predatory offender registration and would be glad to work with you offline on some of those things. And maybe that will address some of the concerns that I had just with the language and the technicalities of this bill. Thank you.
Closing remarks, Representative Knudsen.
Thank you, Chair Novotny, and thank you, committee, for letting me present this bill to you today. This bill is about protecting Kelsey. This bill is about protecting the thousands of people that have been in her position. We have to hold these people accountable, and we have to be able to track them. So thank you for your time and for your consideration.
House File 131 is amended, is laid over for possible inclusion. Representative Knudsen, you and your testifiers can remain at the table because the next bill is also yours. I will move House File 127 before the committee. We will lay House File 127 over for possible inclusion in a committee omnibus. Please begin your testimony. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Novotny. Thank you, committee. Here we are again. This is House File 127. This bill is to protect children. Child pornography is an especially heinous crime. It re-victimizes the victim with every single view. I have had the unfortunate opportunity to look into the eyes of children that have been victims of child pornography. And there are no words to describe the pain and the humiliation that those kids feel. Our current child pornography statutes need to be strengthened to make sure that these predators are off the streets and they can't continue to victimize children. House File 127 increases the penalties for use of child pornography, dissemination of child pornography, and voluntary possession of child pornography. The penalties impose mandatory minimum sentences, increased maximum sentences, and require a fine in addition to the sentence, not in lieu of. The mandatory minimums, maximum sentences, and fines increase if the perpetrator has a prior criminal sexual conduct conviction or is currently required to register as a predatory offender. Penalties for voluntary possession of child pornography also increase if the victim is under the age of 13. This bill also creates mandatory terms of probation for voluntary possession of child pornography that require, if the court doesn't incarcerate the perpetrator in prison, the court should consider incarceration in a local jail, requirement of the offender to complete a sex offender treatment program, and have no contact with minors unless pre-approved by a probation officer. That is my bill, House File 127, Chair Novotny.
I believe you have some testifiers with you. Would it be Sheriff Riggs from Beltrami County?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair, for having me today. Thank you all for the work that you do. I am Sheriff Jason Riggs, and I'm here today representing Beltrami County and public safety. I'm in support of House File 127. We routinely see child pornography type of cases in our office. We share an office with the Bemidji Police Department, who has Bemidji High School. Our offices both investigate child pornography, and child pornography leads to so many more things, such as sextortion. I have a family member that was a victim of that myself. When we receive cases and go to our prosecutors, we oftentimes look for the benefit of having our cases go before federal court, because federal crimes carry a much greater sentence for the offenders in these circumstances. And we've had some very high-profile cases in Beltrami County when it comes to child pornography in recent years. And Minnesota's laws pertaining to, and sentencing guidelines pertaining to child pornography is quite laughable. And so when we have an opportunity to submit those cases to federal court for federal consequences, it does the victims a lot more justice in these cases. Well, I'm going to be brief with that. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Sheriff Riggs. I believe we also have now Scott County Attorney Hosevar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Again, my name is Ron Hosevar, and I'm the Scott County Attorney. I just want to be clear, I'm here as the Scott County Attorney. I'm not here representing the Minnesota County Attorneys Association, which I know regularly comes also to testify on these things. I believe this bill has not come before the County Attorneys Association as of yet. I think it's going to the criminal committee on, I think this coming Tuesday or Wednesday, and then to our executive committee on Friday. So I just want to make that clear that I'm here as a Scott County Attorney. Yeah, what's been said is exactly what I was saying, Sheriff. One thing I was going to talk about was that when these cases come into my office, we will typically get on the phone with the U.S. Attorney's Office and determine whether they can take it or not. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, because the punishment, the consequences are much greater if they go to the U.S. Attorney's Office than if they stay with the Minnesota sentencing guidelines. When they stay with our office, these images are so despicable and the images and some of the films that we see, I have to rotate my prosecutors because after a year, they're burned out. They're like, Ron, I can't do this anymore. I can't look at these pictures anymore. And it's just, it's awful. And you all know you're the government. One of your main, probably the main pillar of your government is to keep the citizens safe. And our children are the ones that need the most protection because they're the most vulnerable. So with this child pornography, it's a violation of the children's rights. It's a lifelong trauma that they're inflicted on. The use of them going across the internet, it encourages further abuse. It's like every other kind of other illegal products, drugs, whatever. If the will is there for someone to receive it, someone to buy it, someone's gonna produce it. So there needs to be legal consequences. There's legal consequences in almost every country in the world. And it's a moral and ethical violation of our standards as a society that this goes on. So there's zero justification for child pornography. So we need to protect these victims. And these stiffer penalties will help protect those victims. It's a deterrence. It's a strong deterrence. A strong sentence discourages the use. It discourages the recidivism. Again, I already talked about public safety. This is the purpose of government, is public safety. And it sends a clear message. Strong sentences on these is a clear message to society that this will not be tolerated. And if you disobey this, you will be sentenced accordingly. You will not be given probation. You will not be allowed to go home to your own family and kids, but you will go to prison. You will face consequences. So I think it's a strong deterrent against recidivism. And as already been discussed, we need it on the state level. So we don't always have to look to the feds to do it because they won't always do it for us. So if it doesn't meet their guidelines, then we're stuck with it. And it's like a slap on the wrist. So we need to get tough with this. Thank you.
Thank you, County Attorney Hocevar. Next testifier that we have signed up is Kelly Jansen. As she is walking up, I'd just like to say, County Attorney Hocevar, look out for your people. Part of one of the most heartbreaking assignments I had was supervising the forensic examiner, the computer forensic examiner in my department. And I was very worried about them always for what they see and go through. So thank you for having them put to work in. Ms. Jansen, could you state your full name and go ahead with your testimony, please?
Hi, my name is Kelly Jansen Thielen. There's been bipartisan support for this legislation in the past, and I trust that that will occur again. Protecting children from the worst of the worst offenders is an issue everyone can get behind. Weak sentences for these crimes against innocent children came to my attention about 4 years ago, and I started working as a citizen lobbyist with former Representative Matt Grossel to increase public awareness, and now I've been working with Representative Knudsen. We have interacted with thousands of Minnesotans across the state, and people are shocked when they learn of how little jail time someone actually serves who is convicted of possessing the crime scene footage of the rape and torture of children. Even though there was a small change in the law in 2021, Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission data shows that this continues to be a huge problem in Minnesota. A data request from 2023 showed that the longest amount of time served for 11 different offenders was just 7 months in jail for Austin Saarinen because he was a repeat offender with a criminal history score of 4. According to the data, almost 90% of those convicted of possession served little to no jail time. A recent example of hands-on abuse is an active case involving Thomas Humiston, who used to live in Minnesota and was just arrested in Nevada for sexual misconduct crimes against an 8- and 10-year-old. During the investigation, they've coordinated with the Beltrami County Sheriff's Office because he has been charged with 2 felony counts of first-degree penetration of contact with a person under 13 in Beltrami County. Information has also led them to believe Humiston is in possession of and distributing child sexual abuse material. It is gut-wrenching every time I read another alert of an arrest or conviction of one of these predators in Minnesota. I'm thankful when they are prosecuted federally, because then I know they will serve real jail time and be off the streets where they can't hurt or exploit children anymore. A million thanks to Chair Novotny and his team for moving Minnesota in the right direction to increase public safety and bring justice to these innocent children. And I also submitted some more cases from Minnesota online. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have several submitted testimonies that are part of your packet that have been included. Representative Knudsen had a request from House TV to get a little closer to the mic when you speak. Representative Hollins.
Oh, first up, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Knudsen. So my question is, I have an 11-year-old, and we're talking a lot now that she has a phone and like what it means and the responsibilities associated with that. And the fact that, you might think something's a funny picture that you take with your friends, but it's not funny and it can actually be considered child pornography. And I am honestly coming here as ignorant, but I would assume that a fair amount of what is considered child pornography is actually is both taken and disseminated by other children, right? Like people under the age of 18. And I'm wondering how your bill would impact, I don't want to say kids being kids, but like kids being irresponsible and not using their phones correctly, but also like potentially having massive implications for their future and their success in life, et cetera. And so, yeah, if you could touch on that, that'd be great.
Actually, Sheriff Riggs, that'd be something that your department would deal with in that situation. Would you like to address that?
I can speak directly, Sheriff Jason Riggs. I can speak directly to the education aspect that both my office and the City of Bemidji Police Department and the City of Black Duck Police Department are doing. We go in and routinely talk to youth throughout that time frame. And unfortunately, kids, you guys all know this, kids are getting younger with phones more so. You're talking an 11-year-old. I have a rule in my house. Nobody gets a phone until they're 17 and they're driving. And that's, it's just one of those things. I'm not speaking for all of Minnesota, obviously, when I say that, but my family member that was a direct result of this was not a youth on youth. This was an adult on youth situation. The education piece of this is probably the most important aspect. And obviously, we can't control parents and what they do. We can control our actions by providing education. As far as the bill itself goes, it's got to be common sense when it comes to looking at these cases from an investigative standpoint and then moving those charges forward. And that's ultimately goes to the county attorney's office for review of what this case is, who ultimately has the charging decision.
Representative Hollins, one more. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, thank you for that explanation. So I guess what you're saying is it's going to be prosecutorial discretion as to when we are applying the law that's proposed here. Is that correct?
Representative Hocevar, you have come
Mr. Chair,
back.
members of the committee, to some extent, yes. There's prosecutorial discretion involved, and the statute does for possession, it does state knowing or with reason to know its content and character for possession. So if and I speak to this to our schools and our throughout my community. I do a lot of education on sexting and what exactly it means, and because you're right, a lot of these kids they're in high school. They know they shouldn't be sending this image out, right? They know they shouldn't be doing it, but they don't know exactly how wrong and illegal it is, and they don't know the lifelong consequences of it. There's a lady who had her image distributed at a fairly young age, but not young enough where people wouldn't recognize her. And it was 10 years later, it came up on some internet site. One of her friends called her at work and said, "Hey, do you know there's an image of you going around the internet?" And she's like, "What?" This is 10 years later. So this stuff has lifelong consequences. But going directly back to your question, yes, there is prosecutorial discretion involved, and there has to be. And I'm very protective of county attorney's office's prosecutorial discretion. We need it in cases such as this, so we can look at all the facts and make an adequate determination on, is this really what the intent of this law is for? Should this person really be charged? This 16-year-old who got some picture on his phone for some reason unbeknownst to him from some person who he has no idea who it is? No, that person should not be charged with a felony. So you look at all the facts and make that decision.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Chair. And first, just to confirm, so this is going to be laid over because a fiscal note has been requested? Is that right?
I assume so.
Oh. Okay. Well, you're
As if there will be.
You're the chair, okay.
Anyone else?
I may have misheard that, Mr. Chair. Okay, thank you. And then I guess, and maybe staff can help with this, I'm not sure if Representative Knudsen, but the way I read the bill, it's set up as, in each of these areas, it's not less than X number of years, which I guess I read as sort of being a mandatory minimum. You represent Knudsen nodding and saying, no matter what happens, there's that minimum number of years. And I saw Representative Knudsen nodding, so I'll assume that we're in good shape on that. So I guess what's, following along Representative Holland's question, I understand as a prosecutor and the testifier that there's discretion about whether or not to bring the charge, but then what there's not discretion then is what to do with the charge. So I understand hopefully a prosecutor wouldn't charge, I don't know, the 17-year-old who takes a picture of her 17-year-old boyfriend in a compromising position, because that is it's you're involved in that's a pornographic work. It's involving a minor which is under 18. That is a crime under this, I believe. I feel confident that it would be. Hopefully, prosecutors wouldn't use their discretion, or would use their discretion, not charge that. But what about a circumstance that's less sympathetic, where we say there should be a criminal charge brought, but now we're saying that there has to be a certain number of years in prison for that young person, or potentially that 18-year-old, then one day, if we're going to talk of an adult. So I guess just wondering how, if you can talk through Representative Knudsen or to your testifiers about kind of how to think through those situations. I worry it seems a little odd to me to rely on prosecutorial discretion, but then not allow any judicial discretion. Fair enough. But then what about those situations where I, as a prosecutor, want to charge the crime, but boy, I don't know that this is something where somebody should be in prison for a number of years when it's an 18-year-old taking a picture of her 17-year-old boyfriend, for example. But maybe let's say, in fact, it is a situation, I say that is a crime and it should be charged for whatever reason. So if you comment on that, thank you.
County Attorney Hocevar, this seems like this would be yours. And
Mr. Chair, thank you. We always have discretion to deal with the case how we want to deal with it. Even the shall, just like criminal sexual conduct first degree, mandatory minimum 144 months. There's sometimes that we negotiate a plea where they don't go to prison for 144 months. But we put that rationale on the record to justify that dispositional departure. So it could be the same situation for the child pornography. So if a prosecutor wanted to, for whatever reason, give that person a break, the age of the victim could be a reason. Maybe you have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old boyfriend and girlfriend, even married for that sake. I've had a situation with a family that is not necessarily from my culture, where they had a very young male marrying a young female, and they were recently in the country, and that was totally acceptable in their culture. But it could have charged the guy with the crime. It was one of the rare occasions where he got a stay of adjudication, and they were dealing with human services and dealing with how to manage, I guess, being in the country. So there are situations where that can happen, but as long as we put the rationale for a dispositional departure on the record and have valid reasons for it, we can deviate from those mandatory minimums.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of time, I think I'll turn to other colleagues. I'll just say I kind of heard in that answer an endorsement of a certain amount of discretion, that we don't want to be quite so doctrinaire to say, if these particular elements are present, then boom, somebody goes to prison for this number of years. To my mind, that's where we do need to be careful with the not less than certain number of years. I appreciate, and again, I have prosecuted gender violence cases for many years, and eager to continue the conversation. I guess we'll sort of see about the costs, et cetera. But I think we do want to be careful when we do these things, that we're not pulling in, that we're having one kind of behavior in our mind and that we're talking about, and yet have of some very different conduct that's going to be before prosecutors and judges, and being careful about that. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks again, Representative Knudsen. I guess I have a couple questions for you. Did you check in with the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault to see if they had an opinion about this bill?
Representative Knudsen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative Mueller. Sorry, it's hard to get that line of sight. I personally have not. I'm sure that this looks familiar to you. This was former Representative Matt Grossel's. I know that he has done a lot of background work on this. And one of our our testifiers today has probably had some of those contacts, but I have not.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think that's really important, especially this year with the budget situation and the coalitions potentially facing federal cuts as well. Their number one ask is for supports for victims, sexual assault advocates, domestic violence shelters, et cetera. And so I think it's important that if we're looking at things with a cost, and we also have to look at, is that going to potentially be taken away from those other services that we know that victim survivors are asking for? So I would highly encourage you to check in with the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I also do want to speak to the Representative Grossel's work on this. I have worked with him over the years, and actually we've changed the law twice already to increase penalties in this arena. And one of the things we did was we added in an enhancement for violations when the minor is under the age of 14 years old. And I noticed that your bill takes that out. And I also noticed that the data that we got from the sentencing guidelines, that's actually being used to increase charges already. So I'm a little confused about why you would take that particular sentencing enhancement out.
Closing statements, Representative Knudsen.
What? I had a question.
Who's got a question?
I just
Oh,
did.
that was, I'm sorry. Representative
I
Knudsen.
wasn't done.
Thank you, Chair Novotny, and thank you, Representative Mueller. That's good to know that they're using that right now. We redrafted this to make it more workable for everybody. I guess that's the best I can say to that right now. But it is good to know that they are using those, that 14 and under.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm not sure that it's unworkable in its current form, and I do have some questions about the workability of this bill. I'm looking especially at line 1.18, and you've got not less than 15 years. And if I do the math, that's 180 months. And so I'm just curious where that'll fit on our sentencing guidelines grids for sex offenses. Right now, the highest for first-degree criminal sexual conduct is 144 months. So I guess my question is, would you be proposing that they create a whole nother section? Then this would elevate above first-degree criminal sexual conduct.
Nonpartisan?
Thank you, Chair Novotny. Thank you, Representative Mueller. This is just trying to fall in line with federal guidelines. So whatever we need to do there, we need to do. These children have to be protected. We're not talking about just 16 and 17-year-old kids. We're talking about babies. We're talking about toddlers. We're talking about very young children that are victims of this. We have to do better as a state at protecting these kids. The images, it's lifelong trauma that these kids will go through because of this. You know, we just heard earlier that the average sentence is probation. Max in the last year, whatever was testified to earlier, was 7 months. We have to get better at protecting kids in the state. For us to rely on federal law in order to prosecute these people, that's ridiculous. We can do better.
I'll finish up.
Thank you.
I have one more.
One more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this isn't a question. I'll just finish up with a comment on that. I've actually prosecuted these cases, and they actually are horrific. And those are images that I will absolutely never forget. I've also civilly committed people who are sexually dangerous. Again, things I will never forget. So I'm not saying that these aren't important cases, but I'm also saying that the bill that you have here really is unworkable in with our current structure of with our sentencing guidelines. The other thing I'll just note is right now, and we need to move on, but you can actually stack sentences. So if somebody has possession of images of multiple different victims, those can be consecutive sentences. If somebody has multiple images of the same victim, you can also stack that so that someone who has 0 points could go all the way up to 180 already. So we do have a lot of tools in the toolbox to work on these, and we strengthened these laws over the last couple of years. So I'll just end with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Closing remarks, Representative Knudsen.
Thank you, Chair Novotny, and thank you again, committee, for allowing me the opportunity to have House File 127 before you today. I guess I kind of used a lot of my lines in my response to Representative Mueller for my closing, but we can do better. We have to do better. What's happening right now, these people are getting probation, which is not justice for these children. So any ideas you have, I'd be happy to hear them, but we can get better. So thank you.
With that, House File 127 is laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you, Representative Knudsen, and especially thanks to the testifiers, some which came from a very long ways away. Some have been waiting to give this testimony for a long time. Next bill on our agenda is File 286. Representative Perryman, please come to the testifier table with the testifiers.
Oh, there, you just gonna fix it.
Very good. Representative Perryman, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the committee for allowing me to present to you House File 286, which
We have to move the bill.
authorizes.
Stand by. Since you are not a member of the committee, Representative Perryman, I will move the bill. And this will be re-referred to Elections, Finance, and Government Operations. Please begin your testimony.
I always wanted to be a part of your committee, though. All right, so thank you for having me, and that I could present to you House File 286, which authorizes local governments, county or city, to conduct a national criminal history check for applicants for massage business or cabaret licenses. And this is in addition to the state background check they are already authorized to do. The bill is because of sex traffickers who are coming to Minnesota to set up a sex trafficking business that poses as a legitimate massage business. There was a massage parlor business that opened up in Waite Park, a district that I represent, a few years ago. And after the city of Waite Park did not find any issues with the authorization to do the state background check, they did not find any issues, but with the license applicants in the state background check, they didn't find. But, however, if the city would have had access to national background check information, they would have found that the applicants were part of a multi-state sex trafficking operation. There is a news article in your packets that pertain to this instance in Waite Park. Sex trafficking operations is not confined to my area. I think you all agree after even hearing some of the last testifiers, it's an issue that's going on statewide. This bill has been circling the committees for a few sessions. This bill was first introduced in 2019 at the prompting of the Lino Lakes Chief of Police, who discovered the same issue in his city, and the inability for Lino Lakes to have access to national criminal history information on the applicants for the massage business license, and had this issue. The Minnesota Sheriff's Association and Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association supported the bill then, and I expect they would still support it today. The original bill, I must emphasize that it included a broader group of business licenses, but I have narrowed the bill down to massage businesses and cabarets because I want to make sure we were targeting sex trafficking and traffickers. This is my offer of a bill. I hope I can get your support.
Thank you, Representative Perryman, and I recognize one of your testifiers, retired Chief Bentrud, and looks like retirement's been good to you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I thought I was off the hot seat, but here I am. But Dave Bentrud, I'm a retired police chief for the city of Waite Park, and I guess I'm here to give a little historical context to this issue. So Chair Novotny and members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm here to testify in support of House File 286. And the City of Waite Park, or Waite Park Police Department, has taken an active role over 10 plus years of investigating sex trafficking in central Minnesota. The trafficking issue manifests itself in different ways, including activity in various massage establishments. We had an explosion, really, of massage parlors opening in Waite Park, probably going back to the mid 2015. We ended up doing at least 2 search warrants that I recall. Occasionally there was a strong nexus to labor trafficking. A lot of the workers it was forced labor situations. In 2019, the City of Waite Park did adopt an ordinance to license massage therapists as well as massage establishments, or i.e. the owner of those businesses. We found that many of the applicants for massage licensing and or ownership came from outside the state of Minnesota. A lot of them we required that they provide information about their training to be a masseuse. Many of them were institutions outside of the state of Minnesota. In some cases, the institution that they claimed to have gone was fraudulent. It was basically a vacant lot or that type of thing. So as far as a criminal background check, we were kind of left to outsource our background check to commercial organizations that provided some degree of background, but quite honestly was not particularly thorough in nature. The ability to obtain prior addressing of applicants and where they lived, we would do what we could to try to get information from the jurisdiction in which they previously lived, but our response rate to those requests for information, we'd have a consent form, was often limited as well. The response rate was not extremely high. So in many cases, we were forced to approve applications really because we couldn't find a legitimate reason to deny. And so I believe that the ability to use the state system to expedite and do a more thorough job in doing our due diligence on the background would be a very positive step. And I will defer to Chief Resnick to share the kind of the current practices and the limitations of the coding that we have.
Chief Resnick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Anthony Resnicek, the current chief of police from Way Park. I took over after David Benchard's retirement. Way Park is like many other cities. We have a city ordinance which allows for local licensing of therapeutic massage establishments and massage therapists. Just in 2025, Way Park has licensed 17 establishments in our city. When we are doing that licensing structure, the police department is responsible for looking into the character of the licensee or the license applicants. The current process for that allows us to use a Purpose Code E for running criminal history information. Purpose Code E only allows us to view adult arrest data less than 1 year old and any adult convictions, but it's Minnesota only. As Mr. Benchard had explained, we do see a lot of applicants coming from out of state. Because they don't have a criminal history here, we have to approve them because there's no basis to deny them. This bill would assist us in being able to see that national criminal history database and to see their past behaviors outside of our lens of Minnesota. This bill will help clear up a lot of those loopholes. Specifically, the fingerprint-based background will allow us to ensure we know who we're talking to and that they aren't using a different name associated from a different state from a different time. It'll also ensure that we get to see their entire criminal history from wherever they had lived prior, and it's not just voluntary for them to say, oh, by the way, I used to live over here. If they don't tell us that, we'll never know it. We've had challenges with a number of licensed establishments in the past. We continue to try to do our very best to license based off of the character of the applicant. This bill would help us with that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions? Representative Coran.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Representative Perryman, for the bill. I know we've already chatted about this. I've already signed on to it as a co-author, so thank you for reintroducing this. It's my understanding that we were close to getting this passed last biennium. So just question for you as far as where the language is at right now. Have you had discussions with just the workability of it to know if there's any technical issues through BCA or anything like that?
Representative Perryman.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Representative, thank you, and thank you for making this bipartisan with me. What I will tell you is that the Minnesota Sheriff's Association and the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association has endorsed this and really supported it, and it has been kicking around a couple of sessions and never did hear back on a position from the BCA. We do have some communications in with them, but they have not taken a position at this time.
Representative Coran.
Thank you. Yeah, and just I'm happy to help you with that process so that we can get this bill to where it needs to be to pass. Again, it's my understanding that there maybe were just some language fixes that were needed in order to just make this workable as soon as it passes. So I know this is, I think when people might think about sex trafficking, like they might think big city, Minneapolis, where there's lots of hustle bustle and a lot of people. But we're finding that people are hiding out in greater Minnesota, in our small towns, in our suburbs. This is an issue in White Bear Lake, as you mentioned, Lino Lakes. Like this is an issue and has been an issue for several years. So thank you for taking it up again, and I'm happy to work with you on it.
Thank you, Rep. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to say thank you, Representative Perryman, for bringing this bill. I do plan on supporting it, and I'm glad you'll be working with Representative Curran on any perhaps technical changes that need to be made. Thank you.
Representative Perryman, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and the committee. I really appreciate you hearing my bill, and I think it's a great bipartisan bill, and I look for everyone's support. Thank you.
I will renew my motion that House File 286 is recommended to be re-referred to the Elections, Finance, and Government Operations Committee. Representative Moeller, are you okay with all in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. House File 286 is re-referred to the Elections, Finance, and Government Operations. Thank you, Representative Perryman, and to your testifiers. Next bill up is case 130. Representative Harder, please come forward to the testifiers table with your testifiers. Representative Harder, since you are a member of the committee, would you like to move House File 130 before the committee?
Chair Novotny, I would like to move House File 130 before the committee and that it be laid over for possible inclusion in the Public Safety Omnibus.
Thank you. Representative Harder, begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Novotny and committee members. Sex traffickers need to be locked up in a secured facility so they cannot continue to prey upon our children, the victims. Current statute provides a maximum sentence of 25 years in prison, 30 years in cases that meet certain requirements. However, there is no minimum sentence for first-degree sex trafficking. There are many mandatory minimum sentences. First-degree assault on a peace officer, a judge, prosecuting attorney, or correctional employee carry anywhere from a 10 to 25-year mandatory minimum, depending upon the level of harm. First-degree criminal sexual contact carries a 12-year mandatory minimum. Secondary criminal sexual contact carries a 7.5-year mandatory minimum. There is a 3-year mandatory minimum sentence for certain crimes if the offender threatens to use a gun, and a 1-year mandatory minimum sentence for those crimes if the offender threatens to use some other type of dangerous weapons. House File 130 establishes a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence for first-degree sex trafficking of a minor under the age of 18. The mandatory minimum is increased to 12 years if the offender has previously committed sex trafficking, if the victim suffered bodily harm during the commission of the offense, if the victim was held in debt bondage, forced or coerced for more than 180 days, and if the offense involved more than one sex trafficking victim. As we heard yesterday, the Sheriff's Association supports this. Mandatory minimums will help to disrupt sex trafficking networks. This bill is about the victims, and we need to support and help them. Chair Novotny, that is my testimony on the bill. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Have here with me today Carolyn. She will help me with the technical questions that you may have with the bill.
Ms. Palmer, for the record, would you state your name, please, again, and go ahead with your testimony?
Thank you, Chair Novotny. My name is Caroline Palmer, and I am the interim supervisor of the Violence Prevention Programs Unit at the Minnesota Department of Health.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm actually not offering testimony. I'm just here to provide technical assistance.
If there's any questions. All right. Members. Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so go here. Representative Harder, thank you. Ms. Palmer earlier had talked about some of the groups that came together to advance the safe harbor efforts and sort of anti-trafficking efforts in the state. Are there groups that you worked with in putting this together, kind of who was consulted, advocates and that sort of thing, if anyone?
Representative Harder.
Yes, thank you, Chair Novotny. At the moment, no, I have not dealt with any groups. Some of what is here came from last year from an amendment, and also from when I was a county commissioner, I'm aware of things that happened within my own county that would pertain to this.
Okay.
So they weren't necessarily near groups, Representative Pinto.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe Representative Harder, can you expand on that just a tiny bit? You said that there were, and I don't want to inquire about, really specific facts, but if you could just expand a little bit of what you're talking about. You said that there were experiences you'd had that perhaps was it sort of a case that where somebody received a lower sentence you felt that was appropriate or something like that, or if you can just expand on that.
Representative Harder.
Thank you, Chair Novotny. The bill is about the victims, and we need to support the victims. And so the bill is a mandatory minimum that if these offenders are charged and convicted, that they at least get a minimum sentence for the crimes that they do.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me think. So perhaps I'll ask, and perhaps I'll ask our nonpartisan staff to help with this, because under the sentencing guidelines, someone who has no criminal history, I believe, who is convicted of sex trafficking in the first degree or convicted of this crime, there would be a minimum number of months that they would need to serve in prison unless there was a departure, which, as I see in your bill, looks like is allowed. And so maybe if we could just get a sense, because it's been a little while since I've done this, as to what the number of months would be the minimum without a departure currently, if somebody has no criminal history.
Representative, or nonpartisan Johnson, would this be your?
Yes, Mr. Chair. If you give me just 2 minutes, I'll be ready.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I may be able to, I had sort of had a guess, but I want to get it confirmed. It looks like Mr. Johnson may be confirming that, Mr. Chair.
I cannot hear you, Mr. Pinto.
I couldn't hear. I'm sitting with me. I'm saying, Mr. Chair, that, well, it looks like Mr. Johnson, I suspect, may be coming close. Just kidding. As he's looking, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I'll note that there's a minimum number of months that somebody receives. And as I see in the bill does allow for departures from the guidelines, which is good, but just understanding that difference is useful here.
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Pinto and the other members, so there are two different types of first-degree sex trafficking. There is sort of a standard level offense and an aggravated level offense, and those are slotted in on the sex offender grid as offense levels A and B. The lowest level sentence that's a default for a level A offense, the presumptive sentence would be 144 months. For a level B offense, the presumptive sentence would be 90 months. There would be a range below 144 that would not be a departure.
Okay. And Mr. Chair,
Representative Pinto.
thank you, Mr. Chair. So maybe, and this is another one, maybe I had already asked this, but it's going to be laid over if it has a fiscal note. So I guess one thing I'll be interested to know then is, I'm looking at line 2.10. It looks like the sentence currently is 144 months if somebody's convicted of aggravated trafficking. So that's something we'll just want to look into as to what the difference is. But I guess my other question then for Representative Harder, so sex trafficking under Minnesota law is defined really quite broadly. It really includes any kind of exchange of sex for money, but where there's a third person present, however that third person involved, as long as they know what's going on. And so I'm troubled, I guess, thinking about, if you have a family member of this person who's involved in prostitution and the money is going to them to pay rent, it's a grandmother, it's an aunt, whoever it is, that person is guilty of sex trafficking under Minnesota law. I think there are good reasons for that if they know where the money comes from. I mean, it's exploitation. But it does trouble me, the idea that person would be sentenced to 10 years in prison, or if there's somebody who's also being prostituted but is taking pictures or driving somebody. So if you could just give a sense, Representative Harder, like, do those persons, should the sentence for that be 10 years, and should Minnesota taxpayers be paying, I think that's whatever, $750,000 to put somebody in prison in that circumstance, Representative Harder?
Representative Harder.
Thank you, Chair Novotny and Representative Pinto. That is a very good question. Because in that situation, you do want the attorneys to have some ability to, right, the charge, what you're going to be, the consequences for the crime that's committed. But I still go back to that there are consequences that people have to become accountable for. And to do that to a child is just, it's just beyond any comprehension. And so, I go back to that this is a victim, that person who sex trafficking their own family member clearly needed help to begin with. Because why would you do that to somebody? Why would you subject somebody to a sexual assault for rent when there are so many organizations in this state to help people?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and Representative Harder, I'll note that there's no requirement of force or fraud or coercion. I mean, all it requires is that the person know what's going on. And again, I mean, I would agree with you. It's wrongful conduct. Maybe I'll just close with this, just to say there really are consequences currently under Minnesota law for sex trafficking along the broad range of what we've been describing it as. As I think I'd said previously, I've prosecuted the case with the longest sentence for trafficking in state history, and 20, 30, in fact, in that case, more than 40 years. But I do think we want to be very careful about how we're setting penalties. And I feel like we're recognizing in a number of these comments about the need for discretion for prosecutors, the need for discretion for judges. And to my mind, it's important to keep that, while still currently, we actually do limit the discretion that somebody at least is getting 90 months unless there's a departure, which your bill provides for too. So an ongoing conversation, I think, but thank you for this. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Pinto. Representative Harder, do you have any closing comments?
Well, if I can get through them. Thank you, Chair Novotny, and I appreciate the committee here to hear this bill. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your questions, very thought-provoking, which is why we're all here, right? Both sides. And I just want to make sure that this bill would make sure that the abusers are locked up. I mean, that's the important thing, that our children are protected. That is the goal, is to protect our children. So thank you for your time today.
With that, House File 130 was laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you, Representative Harder, and your testifier. The final bill on the agenda is 129. Representative Repinski will make his way to the testifier table. Representative Repinski, is this your first bill?
Thank you, Chair. This is actually my second bill.
Well, never.
I understand my first one, I'm supposed to bring treats, but luckily somebody brought treats to my first one, so I was
Salty
exempt from
veteran.
that.
Could use a treat.
Representative Repinski, since you are a member of this committee, would you like to move House File 129 before the committee and recommend that it is referred to the Committee on Health, Finance, and Policy?
Chair Novotny, I would like to move House File 129 before the committee and recommend that it is re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee.
Representative Repinski, begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair. Fellow representatives, the legislature created the Safe Harbor Program for exploited children in 2011. The program is run by the Department of Health. The legislature requires that the Director of Sex Trafficking Prevention submits a report to the Commissioner of Health every 2 years. You should have the executive summary of the most recent report in your packets. Protecting children from human trafficking is important to all of us here, and as policymakers, we would have a benefit of having that report. House File 129 simply requires that the biannual report of the Director of Sex Trafficking Prevention provides the Commissioner of Health must also be provided to Public Safety and Health Committees in the House and Senate, and I would appreciate your support on this.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Representative Repinski? Representative Coran.
Sure. Do you mind if I sign on?
Would really appreciate that.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks.
Absolutely.
There is no fiscal note. Representative Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Repinski. Plan on supporting the bill. Thank you.
Anyone else? All in favor of motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The motion to re-refer House File 129 is passed. Our next committee meeting will be on Tuesday, February 18th at 3:00 p.m. There is no further business before the committee today. This meeting is adjourned.
See that the government